Chuck, the search for extraterrestrial intelligent life is certainly a great quest for mankind, a great scientific exploration. But you've called it a spiritual quest, which has theological overtones. Why did you do that?
Well, I think it's related to human interest. I think the reason that people are so interested, why there's so many interesting movies that people flock to, why Star Trek was fascinating, is there's human interest in the question of what's out there. And the interest in drama, dramatization through fiction. At the moment, science, as you know, doesn't give us much data. We don't have the tools yet, and we're not sure we ever will. But certainly we're trying to see if there's exoplanetary life, whether it's like plants, algae on Mars, or whether it's like beings like ours in some other place, probably further away. But the spiritual aspect really just connects with the human interest aspect, that it's an exploration of what our universe is like. And I don't think that, certainly my tradition, I'm a Christian or ordinary variety, has a stake in sort of one finding or another. But I think it will inform what our universe is like. For me, you can hope for what the universe is like. You know, that's if you don't know, if it's not against data, it's okay to hope.
What's your hope?
Well, my hope is that it's more beautiful. For me, an empty universe is not as beautiful as a universe that's brimming with life, with diverse different experiments, that's full of different forms of creativity. For me, that's more beautiful. There was an interesting debate in the 13th century about Aristotle. Aristotle argued that there could be only one world. This was a set debate. And the famous theologian Thomas Aquinas followed him. But there was, in the 13th century, there was a bishop of Paris who was involved with the University of Paris. His name was Tempier. And he actually made an anathema against Aristotle. He said, we cannot say that there could only be one world, because that would be limiting the creativity of God. We shouldn't follow Aristotle just because he is an authority. We should be open. And it has been argued that this is the origin of science in some way. Pierre Duhem in Paris in the 20th century made this argument. I find that very beautiful. There's Nicholas of Cusa, who was a cardinal. He's an early mathematician, and he came up with some early concepts of infinity in mathematics, and he had a cosmology of infinite worlds and unbounded worlds. This followed into the thought of Giordano Bruno, who of course was executed in 1600 for reasons many people think have to do with his cosmology. It's probably unlikely, more to do with.
In this magnificent flow of human intellectual history, the question of the universe and its potential population has been a rich one. But if we look today, it gets beyond philosophy. I mean, we can really discover stuff about the reality of planets in which there could be. And so this is a special time.
Yes.
We've moved beyond philosophy.
Yes, and science is really important, and it's going to be expensive and difficult. And one of the most important aspects for science, for why this could be, in some sense, a spiritual quest connected with human interest, is funding this stuff. For the American people, they should be passionate about it. They should be passionate about learning what's out there. The challenges of, say, imaging the closest exoplanet that would be Earth-like, say at a distance of 10 light years, that'll involve a thing called a large interferometer, but it won't be an interferometer sitting on the ground. It'll be a space interferometer. It'll be a large number of mirrors. And the technological challenge of making a thing like that is very difficult. And to make that a serious national agenda with passion behind it, so the government thinks that it's important and the American people are behind it, would take some enthusiasm. Right now we have a problem, it's almost the reverse, because of problems between science and issues of faith or meaning. So if you could flip that around, if the American people could put some of the enthusiasm they have for films, like Star Trek and so forth, into real exploration of the real questions, at least close to us in our galaxy, that would be a major step of progress.
If you are passionate about your belief system, about the existence of a possible God or a theology, I can think of few experimental questions in science which so richly touch on that issue than whether we're alone or whether we're not alone, whether there's life or whether there's intelligent life out there.
a lot of Christians find it difficult to imagine that there would be other worlds out there. It's quite common if you ask people. I don't know what the opinion polls are, but you'll find that Christians will be threatened by that. And there's a kind of a pre-Copernicanism in this, that because there's a belief in the dignity of being human, there's a creation of a specialness, the idea of love, divine love for humans.
Also, with Christians, there's the issue of the incarnation.
Sure, absolutely.
And if Christians believe that Jesus came here, was God, if there are other worlds, other beings, did Jesus have to go there too, or is there another Jesus? There are a whole series of issues we can.
They're those kind of issues. They're more popular than they are purely theological.
Sure.
Because the theological idea would say, well, n equals 1 creativity, n equals 5, n equals infinity creativity is consistent with the love of God, which would not necessarily be limited.
It's interesting though. There's this threat, and
Yes.
the threat is based upon a traditional understanding that this world has to be special,
Yes,
and in a sense, it limits God's creativity.
yes.
Or it almost calls God a wastrel for taking this whole universe and just allocating it just for Earth.
Well, I'm a parent. Maybe you are too. And when we're parents, our children are special. But it doesn't mean that the neighbors aren't special, or that they don't have to exist for our children to be special.
For the neighborhood, this whole Earth was only created so your family could exist.
Yeah, so it's more special to have neighbors that are also special. And part of loving our own kids is our context.
But look, flip it around, though. Look at it from the atheist's point of view, because they would take every argument that you and I have just had and reversed it. They would say that if we find a universe populated with life, they would say, see, Earth is not very special. People are not special.
Yes.
There's nothing special about life. On the other hand, the same atheist philosophers, if perchance a billion years from now we still haven't discovered any life in the universe, then what would the atheists say? They would say, see, life is so rare that it's not built into the laws of physics. There's nothing special about life. It's just a pure accident.
Yes.
So either side,
Yes.
the theistic side or the
Yes.
atheistic side,
Yes.
could both justify their own belief system based on the data. But that still doesn't eliminate the need and the desire to search and to find out truth.
I think these are meta questions, and I think it's almost always a mistake to try to pin a philosophical point of view, whether it's theism or atheism, on the outcome of some scientific hypothesis. So that maybe not always, but I think most of the time it's a mistake to do that. It can seem a little weaselly, but it goes in both directions. And science is science, and science is not ideology. Science is not faith or theology. There's a big gulf between. And so, Robert Frost said, good fences make good neighbors. And having a fence doesn't mean you can't engage in dialogue. It doesn't mean you can't have dinner with your neighbor. It doesn't mean you can be friends with your neighbor. But it's different. Your neighbor's world is different than yours. And science is different from ideology. In fact, one of the biggest problems is the ideologicalization of science, the using of the legitimacy of science and its authority to try to persuade people that some ideology is true and that they need to believe it because science says. That's wrong. That's damaging to science. And ultimately, it's damaging to serious philosophy and certainly to serious faith.
On this subject, though, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, we've already seen that each side can have their own ideology, interpret it what they want. What we all should agree upon is that the nature of the question is a fundamental probe of reality. You can touch something special about the universe by this question.
Yes.
And so we all should unite in seeking a true answer.
Well, Christian de Duve is perhaps prominent as a biologist for having come up with this idea that that life is somehow written into the constitution of nature, and that you might say the laws of physics or chemistry, so that life should be probable. It may be unusual that it arises in terms of one planet's history, but in terms of the scale of what cosmology shows us about the immensity of stars, 10 to the 22 stars perhaps in our galaxy, perhaps 10 to the 22 galaxies simply within the light cone, which is maybe an infinitely small part of the whole of the entire cosmos, and then there may be infinite universes. So But the idea that life could be common because it's natural for life to arise in certain types of environment is very interesting, because that does beg this question about purpose versus accident. So there does tend to be more of a stake, for me anyway, in the frequency of life in connection with the idea that the universe is purposive. For a theistic position, you pretty much have to believe in purpose. I mean, maybe you can wiggle out of it, but I think that's pretty tricky.
Agree with you there, but how are you defining life? Are you defining life as anything that is simple, single cellular life for plants, or must your life at some place be sentient, conscious life like us?
No. For me, I think that life is beautiful even if the observer, us, isn't there. I think a forest is beautiful in and of itself. It may be more beautiful if somebody is enjoying it, if somebody has the conscious ability to appreciate it, to sense the wonder. That may be more beautiful. But I think that things can be beautiful in themselves.
So if I said, okay, I'm asking you for your speculation right now. You're a trained scientist, physicist, space scientist. You've thought a lot about theology, philosophy, relationship with science. Do you think there's sentient, conscious life beyond Earth?
Well, as a scientist, I could only say we don't know. But as a human being, I could say I hope so. And if I have to put a bet, sure. But whether that bet will have to be paid in my lifetime is another question. You know, this issue of whether the universe is hospitable for life is an open one. It is clear, however, from science that the universe is inhospitable for life in some aspects. We do observe events related to gamma ray bursts, which are incredibly energetic. And those create death zones in galaxies, or at least they radiate whole halves of planets during some period of irradiation. They are life busters, and that's a very interesting phenomenon. And part of the debate about looking at the universe and thinking it's bio-friendly or biocentric has to take into account the randomness, the disaster, things that for us would be a horrific catastrophe. If a gamma ray burster merger of black holes or whatever it would be exactly, went off within, say, 500 light years of us, at least half our planet would be extinguished. It would probably destroy half of the planet's atmosphere during the irradiation. So one has to consider this. It's a kind of cosmological example of what theologians call the problem of evil, understanding things that are really nasty, like the Holocaust that happened in this world. And the vision of cosmology just takes it to a much larger scale.